Hey, you know what time it is? Gotcha, yes! We're back! Hi, lovelies, hi. We are back with another installment of Storytime with Chris. As I always say, you don't have to watch these videos when they go live. You're more than welcome to watch them in your downtime, nap time, max relaxing, chillaxing time, in between time, mean time, scheme time, study time, break time, CP time, anytime that you want to hear a highly animated voice bring you wonderful stories of magic, fantasy, science fiction, adventure, music, and many, many more in between. Hi, lovelies. Take some time to breathe in. Breathe out. So relaxing. Nothing's wrong, darlings. I just like to emphasize good practices, and when you're feeling busy or stressed or you're overwhelmed or when you're feeling a need to escape for a little bit, breathe through your nose, breathe out of your mouth, breathe in through the nostrils, out of the mouth, or vice versa, breathing in from the mouth, breathing out through the nostrils. It's a chemical response that is an endorphin booster, and endorphins are the chemicals within our body's chemistry that allow us to have feelings of joy and euphoria, light and levity and all of that. And it's also just a good breathing exercises to strengthen the lungs and to bring relaxation. But let's go ahead. We are now in the final chapter of this epic story. The main characters, Jane, Barney, and Simon, Will, Bran, Merriman, and John Rowlands, have successfully driven back the dark for the last time. And the light has finally won. And the world is safe from the direct powers of the dark. Now, let's see how this story ends. This 5-book epic. And we're going to go on a break for about a week. Anytime we finish up a book, we go on a break for a week. Oh, it's 7:47. Oh, that's... All right. Chapter 20. One Goes Alone. They stood in silence about the tree, unable to speak. High up where at last few tatters of storm cloud blew dark across the sun, Herne, the antlered hunter, put back his fierce head and gave a long, triumphant cry, the gathering call that is lifted up by the horde when the quarry is slain. His white mare leapt across the sky, whinnying high and clear, like the singing of the wind on the hill, curving down to a place where a stream of high wind-blown cloud lay like a river across the sky. Out and down the hunter leapt, and in the very instant that he seemed to plunge into the river of the sky and disappear, instead they saw sailing out from that same point the great ship Predwin, graceful and high-prowed, with the green standard of Lord Arthur rippling out at bow and stern. Closer and closer she came, sailing on the wind, and among the 6, beside the tree, Will saw Bran slowly raise the sword Erias and thrust it down into the scabbard visible now at his side. It was a strange, reluctant gesture that Will could not interpret. He stared at his friend and at the pale face and the tawny eyes beneath the white hair, but he could see no expression there as Bran watched the long ship sail towards them down the sky. He found himself reflecting instead, not for the first time, that Bran's golden eyes were curiously like those of the wild huntsman, Herne. And then the ship Predwin was upon them, and he was looking instead at the blue-gray eyes and weathered, brindled, bearded face of the leader king, Arthur. Arthur was looking past him, at the fragile, slim, blue-robed figure of the lady standing a little apart from them all. He stepped from the prow of the boat where he stood and down to the land, and he knelt on one knee before the lady and bent his head.
"Madam,"
he said, his voice as warm with the pleasure of living as when Will had first heard it. "Your boatman awaits." Will stood with his head singing in bewilderment, feeling the baffled awe of the three Drews beside him. The lady came forward to the boat. With the beckoning touch on Arthur's arm and the casual closeness of those who belonged to the same family. "It is done," she said. Suddenly there was a deep weariness in the music of her voice that spoke of a great age in spite of the calm, ageless beauty of her fine-boned face. "Our task is accomplished, and we may leave the last and longest task to those who inherit this world and all its perilous beauty." She looked back at all of them. As if in farewell, she smiled at Barney, at Simon, and more lingeringly at Jane. Then she looked at John Rowland standing empty-eyed and stiff beside the broad oak tree, and she moved swiftly to him and took both his hands. Rowlands looked at her, his dark Welsh face drawn down by lines at nose and mouth that had never seemed so marked before. "John," the lady said softly, "in all this great matter you have done more for your world. More for your world than any of us, even before your courage at the end. For you could have retreated into an unseen happiness of your own, and yet gave it up. You are a good and honest man, and for a time, now, you must be an unhappy man, but it is only for a time." She released his hands, but still gazed commandingly into his eyes, and John Rowlands looked back at her without awe or subservience, and shrugged. He said nothing. I was like, what? Okay. I was like, why is my brightness so low? Hold on. There we go. That's better. "You have made a hard choice," the lady said, "and lost the partner and pattern of your life thereby. I cannot give you back your bloodwind, that ambitious, fallen figure, but I can give you another chance gentler than the first. In a moment you will be back in your own world and time, and there you will find that the appearance of your wife has had some tragic accident and died. It is for you to decide whether or not in that moment you want still to remember all that has happened to you. You may indeed remember the hard truth about the light and the dark and the true nature of your wife if you wish." John Rowland said, expressionless, half to himself, "It is very strange. There was one thing she would never tell me. It was a joke with her. She would never tell me where or when she was born." The lady reached out a hand in pity, then let it fall. "Or," she said gently, "instead you may forget. You may, if you wish, forget all that you have seen ever of the Lords of the Dark and the Light. And although you will then have perhaps a deeper grief at the loss of your wife, you will mourn her and remember her as the woman you knew and loved." "That would be living a lie," John Rowland said. "No," Merriman said from behind him, very strong and deep. "No, John, for you did love her, and all love has great value. Every human being who loves another loves imperfection, for there is no perfect being on this earth. Nothing is so simple as that." "It is for you to choose," the lady said. She moved to the boat and paused beside it, looking back. John Rowland stood facing them all, still without visible emotion. Then he turned his dark eyes to the lady with a warmth came into them. "I cannot choose this time," he said with a wry smile. "Not such a choice as that. Will you, by your grace, do it for me?" "Very well," the lady said. She raised her arm, pointing. "Walk away from me, John Rowlands, and when you turn, you will find a path at your feet. Follow it. In the moment that you pass the one tree, you will be gone from here and instead be on another path in your own valley that you know far better than this, and whatever it is in your mind that will be whatever choice I have made for you. And we wish you well." John Rowlands bent his head for an instant and looked from one to another of them with a half-smile that held no happiness, but great affection. He looked past at Bran. "Michael tin harach bakchen," he said. Then he turned and walked away towards the immense spreading oak, on a path that no one else could see, and as he drew level with the tree, he was no longer there. The lady sighed. "He shall forget. she said. "It is better so." Arthur put out a hand to her, and she stepped down into the boat. A rising wind blew, rocking Prydwen on the river of the sky, and suddenly Will had the sense once more of a huge throng, and knew that all the old ones of the circle were making their way abroad to sail with the lady and the king. At the ship's main mast now the vast sail rose, square, billowing, marked with the cross wheeled within a circle, the sign of the light. He heard the cries of sailors, timbers creaking, halyards clattered against spars. Will glanced at the three Drews beside him, and saw on their faces the beginning anguish of loss and a long emptiness, but he could not keep his eyes for more than a moment from the great ship. He looked back, and in the ghostly throng of beings on her decks, he saw in one quick flash after another the faces of those he had known on his journey and on other journeys in this time and other times. A tall, burly figure in a smith's apron raised a long hammer in salute. He saw a bright-eyed small man in a green coat wave to him. An imperious, gray-haired lady leaning on a stick made him a formal little bow. He had the flash of a smile from a stout brown-faced man with a tonsure of white hair. He saw Glyndwr and the frail form of the king of the lost land, and then with a jerk of his heart, he saw Gwion looking at him, smiling his brilliant smile. Then the wind began to grow stronger out of the clouds, and the sail billowed and flapped as if impatient, and the faces merged into the misty crowd. Not the facts. The facts are there that they merged into the misty crowd. Arthur stood in the prow, his bearded head outlined against the sky, and held out his hand to Bran. His warm face rang out triumphant and welcoming. "Come, my son." Bran came quickly towards him, then paused. He was close to Merriman, his white hair and pale face almost luminous against Merriman's deep blue cloak. Will looked on sadly, knowing it would be for the last time, seeing in Bran's face a mixture of longing and determination and regret. "Come, my son," said the warm, deep voice again. "The long task of the light is over, and the world is freed of the peril of dominion by the dark. Now it is all a matter for men. The six have performed their great mission, and we have fulfilled our heritage, you and I, and now we may have rest in the quiet silver-circled castle at the back of the north wind among the apple trees. And those we leave behind may think of us in greeting each night when the crown of the north wind, the Corona Borealis, rises above the horizon in its circlet of stars." He reached out an arm again. "Come, there is a tide in this matter which is almost at the full, and I do not sail on the ebb." Bran looked at him in yearning, but he said clearly, "I cannot come, my lord." There was a silence, into which only the wind softly sang. Arthur let his arm come slowly down at his side. Bran said, stumbling, "It is what Gwion said, when the lost land was to be drowned and he would not leave it. I belong here. If it is a matter for men now, as you say, then the men are going to have a hard time of it, and perhaps there are things later that I might be able to do to help, even if there are not. Still, I belong." "Loving bonds," Merriman said. "That is what I have here." And he said, he was looking up at Merriman beside him, that those bonds are outside the high magic, even because they are the strongest thing on the earth. Merriman stood. From his mind, Will could feel something like awe. "That is true," Merriman said, "but consider well, Bran. If you give up your place in the high magic, your identity in the time that is outside time, you will be no more than mortal like Jane and Simon and Barney here. You will be the Pendragon no longer, ever. You will remember nothing that has happened. You will live and die as all men do. You must give up all chance of going out of time with those of the light, as I shall go before long, and as one day long hence will go too. And you will never see your High Father again." Bran turned sharply toward Arthur, and as he watched the two stare at one another, Will saw again the tawny eyes of Heron, the hunter, in Bran's face, and yet a look of Arthur, too, as if all three were one and the same. He blinked, wondering. All at once, Arthur smiled, proud and loving, and he said softly, "Go where you feel you should go, my son Bran Davis of Clovid, and may my blessing go with you." He stepped down over the side of the boat again to the grassy bank, and he held his arms open, and Bran ran to him. For a moment they stood close. Then Arthur stepped back, smiling, and Bran, looking at him all the while, drew Erias, white and gleaming from the scabbard at his side, slipped the sword belt over his head, and held out both sword and scabbard to his father. Will heard Merriman sigh gently as if in release, and found his own fists unwittingly clenched, and Arthur took Erias in one hand and the scabbard in the other, and sheathed the sword. He looked for a moment past Bran to Merriman, and his eyes smiled, though his mouth was serious now. "I will see you in a little while, my lion," he said, and Merriman nodded his head. Then the king stepped back into his ship, Predwin, and the broad sail filled and bellied out, and with all the hosts of shades of light looking back without sign of farewell or any ending, the ship sailed across the sea, scattered with small islands. Small sunlit clouds lay scattered there, so that the blue sky was like a small island, and there was no telling whether the ship was in sea or sky when it disappeared. Bran stood watching until there was no ship to watch, but Will could see no regret on his face. "That must have been what John Rowlands meant," Bran said quietly. "John Rowlands?" said Will. "In Welsh, when he left, he said to me, 'See you later, boyo.'" Jane said softly, "But he didn't know you would come back." "No," Bran said. Merriman said, "But he knows, Bran." Bran looked up at him, very young and vulnerable suddenly, with his pale eyes unprotected, and the astonishing burden of the sword Erias taken from his side. Was it the right thing to do? Merriman threw back his awesome white-maned head as impulsively as a schoolboy, and let out a hoot of breath, and that was the most unguarded sound that they had ever heard him utter. "Yes," he said, sobering. Suddenly, "Yes, Bran, it was the right thing for you and for the world." Bran moved at last, with Barney from the place on the grassy slope where he and Simon and Jane had been standing close for a long time, watching in a wondering silence. He said anxiously, "Gummery, are you really going away, or will you stay too?" "Oh, Barnabas," Merriman said, and Jane found herself turning to him in swift motherly concern. There was such a weariness in his tone. "Barnabas, Barnabas, time passes for the old ones even as for you. And though the seasons turn in every year as much as in the ones before, yet the pattern of the world is different in every year that goes by. My time is done here. My time and the time of the light. There will be other work for us to do elsewhere." He paused and smiled at them, the weariness fading a little from his bony, deep-lined face, with the fierce hawk-like nose and the shadowed eyes. "Here now are the 6, he said, together for the first and last time in the place that was destined for us, on a chalk hill in the Chiltern Hundred of Buckinghamshire, where centuries ago men fleeing from the dark tried vainly to hide their treasures and gave prayers to the sky for safety. Look at it now. Look well. Keep a little of it alive." So wondering what he might mean, they looked hard and long at the slope of smooth green grass with tiny orange-yellow toadflax growing here and there, and small blue butterflies fluttering. They looked at the copse of beech trees caping the hill, and the broad, mysterious oak tree standing just below the wood, at the clear blue sky scattered with puffy white clouds. And then, although Merriman made no move, each of them blinked suddenly as their vision seemed to blur, and they staggered a little with the singing in their ears and a giddiness taking away their balance. They saw everything about them shiver strangely, as if the air were dancing in the heat of a fire. The outlines of the giant oak wavered, grew dim, and disappeared. The green of the hill darkened, and the shape of its slope was no longer a smooth arc. Though the sun still shone, there were dark patches on the hill now, of yellow flecked green and brown and purple, where gorse and bracken and heather grew. Other shapes rose in the distance. Far away mountains misted gray and blue on a hazy horizon, and when they turned to look over the shadows of their shoulders, they saw spread below them a broad valley golden with sand, and the winding silver thread of a river making its way to the immense blue sea. They could hear the erratic, aimless calling of sheep now and then in the silence, basso bravado answered by tenor. Somewhere far below them a dog barked, and over their heads, gliding down from the Welsh hillside to the river and the seaside, came a single seagull keening its one repeated melancholy cry. Merriman took a long, gentle breath and let it out again. He said once more softly, "Look well." Jane said in a very small voice, looking out at the bar of golden sand that the river had set as guard against the sea, "Shall we never see you again?" "No," Merriman said. "None of you except my will, the watchman there. That is the only right way." There was a command and a clear strength in his voice that caught each of them into stillness, gazing at him, held by the bright dark eyes and the bleak face. "For remember," he said, "that it is altogether your world now, you and all the rest. We have delivered you from evil, but the evil that is inside men is at the last a matter for men to control. The responsibility and the hope and the promise are in your hands and the hands of the children of all men on this earth. The future cannot blame the present, just as the present cannot blame the past. The hope is always here, always alive, but only your fierce carrying can fan it into a fire to warm the world." His voice rang out over the mountain, more impassioned than any of them had ever heard a voice before, and they stood quiet as standing stones listening. "For Drake is no longer in his hammock, children, nor is Arthur somewhere sleeping, and you may not lie idly accepting the second coming of anybody now, because the world is yours and is up to you. Now, especially since man has the strength to destroy this world, it is the responsibility of man to keep it alive in all its beauty and marvelous joy." His voice grew softer, and he looked at them with the faraway dark eyes that seemed to be looking out into time. "And the world will still be imperfect, because men are imperfect. Good men will still be killed by bad, and sometimes by other good men. And there will still be pain and disease and famine and anger and hate. But if you work and care and are watchful, as we have tried to be for you, then in the long run the worse will never ever triumph over the better, and the gifts put into some men that shine as bright as Arias the sword show light the dark corners of life for all the rest in so brave a world." There was a silence, and the small sounds of the mountain drifted back into it, and the faint calls of sheep, the humming of a distant car, and far above the cheerful trilling of a lark. "We'll try," Simon said. "We'll try our best." Merriman gave him a quick, startling grin. "Nobody can promise more than that," he said. They looked at him mournfully, unable to grin in return, weighted by the melancholy of parting. Merriman sighed and swept his midnight blue cloak around him and back across his shoulder. "Come now," he said. "The oldest words have it the best. Be of good cheer. I go to join our friends because I am very tired. And none of you will remember more than the things that I have been saying now, because you are mortal and must live in present time. And it is not possible to think in the old ways there. So the last magic will be this, that when you see me for the last time in this place, all that you know of the old ones and of this great task that has been accomplished will retreat into the hidden places of your minds, and you will never again know any hint of it except in dreams. Only Will, because he is of my calling, must remember, because the rest of you will forget even that. Goodbye now, my 5 companions. Be proud of yourselves, as I am proud of you." He embraced each one of them in turn, a brief hug of farewell. They were grim-faced and their eyes were wet. Then Merriman went up the mountain over the springy grass and the outcrops of slate, through the browning bracken and the yellow-starred gorse, and paused only when he was at the very top, outlined against the blue sky. They saw the familiar tall figure standing very erect, with the fierce nose profile and the springing shock of white hair blowing a little now in the wind that had risen out of nowhere. It was an image that would flicker in and out of their dreams for the rest of their lives, even when they had forgotten all else. Merriman raised his arm in a salute which none of them could bear to answer, and then in a subtle inflection of movement the arm stiffened, the 5 fingers spread wide and pointed at them. And a wind whirled on the hill, and the slope against the sky was empty, and 5 children stood on the roof of Wales, looking out over a golden valley and the blue sea. "It's a terrific view," Jane said. "Worth the climb, but the wind's made my eyes water." "It must blow like that anything up here," said Simon. "Look at the way those trees are all bent to inland." Bran was gazing puzzled at a small blue-green stone in the palm of his hand. "Found this in my pocket," he said to Jane. "You want it, Jenny O?" Barney said, gazing up over the hill. "I heard music. Listen." "No, it's gone. Must have been the wind in the trees." "I think it's time we were starting out," Will said. "We've got a long way to go." On the day of the dead, when the year 2 dies, must the youngest open the oldest hills. Through the door of the birds where the breeze breaks, their fire shall fly from the raven boy and the silver eyes that see the wind, and the light shall have the harp of gold. By the pleasant lake the sleepers lie, on Catfan's way where the kestrels call. Though grim from the grey king's shadows fall, yet singing the golden harp shall guide, to break their sleep and bid them ride. With light from the lost land shall return, 6 sleepers shall ride, 6 signs shall burn, and where the midsummer tree grows tall, by Pendragon's sword, the dark shall fall. And that is the end of Susan Cooper's The Dark is Rising sequence. Love this. We got it done. We got it done. Yes. We did it. And this is why I love Storytime, because I don't do it for the views. I don't want to be viral sensation. I don't want to make money off of it. This is my passion project and my love for you all. My love
that we get to visit, my love of art, my love of art, beauty of life. In this great event, our hearts and minds. Life is a lot like that when you're young. When you get into the mysteries and confounding quests of life with people who love you, whether it's your best friend, childhood friend, classmate, sibling, cousin. This world is made richer when you surround yourself by people who love you and who protect you, and would do the same that you would do for them. And that's what this story is about. Love, friendship, adventure, discovering one's purpose, embracing one's purpose. That's why I love The Dark is Rising sequence. And I'm glad I got to read that for you all. Good night, my lovelies. Good night.